Roasting is a cooking method that uses dry heat, most commonly in the oven. Dry hot air surrounds the food, cooking it evenly on all sides. With roasting, the outer layers become heated and progressively the heat penetrates the meat. Roasting is primarily used for moderate to larger cuts of meat. In the case of lamb, the cuts that are most commonly roasted include loin roasts or saddles, a bone-in leg of lamb, a boneless leg of lamb leg cuts such as the lamb top round, and of course, the rack of lamb. Before roasting, you'll want to trim excess fat off the roast. Place your roast, fat side up, on a rack in a heavy, shallow roasting pan. A heavy pan will help conduct heat evenly, and the rack will suspend a roast above any drippings or liquid. Make sure the pan is large enough for dry air to circulate around the roast. Keep in mind that hotel pans are a poor choice for roasting due to their thin gauge. Sheet pans are also a poor choice because of their low sides. There are several ways that chefs roast lamb. Low temperature cooking for tougher cuts of meat. Moderate temperature cooking, or a combination of high and low temperature cooking, for more tender cuts. With the combination method, the roast is browned in a hot oven for 15 to 20 minutes. Then the oven temperature is reduced to about 300 to 325 degrees Fahrenheit to complete the roasting process. For smaller cuts, such as a rack of lamb, or even some larger ones, it's advantageous to sear the lamb in a large skillet before transferring to a preheated oven for roasting in order to develop a well-colored and flavored crust without overcooking the inside of the meat. Although searing is often said to lock in the moisture or seal in the juices, it has been shown that searing results in a greater net loss of moisture versus cooking to the same internal temperature without first searing. The searing, whether done in the oven or in a skillet, however, does produce a golden brown crust and desirable flavors. Most of the meat's flavor develops when it's cooked. The amount of fat in the meat influences its flavor, as does a process called the Maillard reaction. The Maillard reaction occurs when the denatured proteins on the surface of the meat recombine with the sugars present. The combination creates the stronger, meaty flavor and changes the color. In the early 20th century, Louis-Camille Maillard was trying to figure out how amino acids linked up to form proteins. He discovered that when he heated sugars and amino acids together, the mixture slowly turned brown. The Maillard reaction is also called the Browning reaction and results in great aromas and flavor, not to mention color. The timetable for roasting lamb will vary depending on the cut. At 325 degrees Fahrenheit, a bone-in roast will cook for about 25 minutes per pound, while a boneless roast will require about 30 minutes of cooking per pound. The color of the juices is also an indicator of doneness. The redder the juices are, the rarer the roast is. With experience, chefs can also check for doneness by touch, the same as with grilled meats, but this is harder with large roasts. However, the best way to check a lamb roast for doneness is by using an instant read meat thermometer. When inserting an instant read thermometer, insert it into the center of the thickest part of the roast away from the fat and bone. The USDA recommends that meats such as lamb be cooked to a minimum of 145 degrees Fahrenheit for medium rare. Large roasts near the end of the cooking time contain a great deal of heat energy and continue to cook after being removed from the oven. This effect is known as carryover cooking. Thus, remember to remove your roast from the oven when your roast is about 10 degrees lower than your desired degree of doneness. Allow a roast to rest for 10 to 20 minutes after it's removed from the oven. The reason roasted lamb should rest is also to allow time for the muscle fibers to relax and juices to redistribute throughout the roast. If you slice into a roast when it immediately comes out of the oven, all the juices would pour out onto the platter and the resulting meat would be dry. Resting of the roast makes for a more tender piece of meat. When the roasting process is finished, the bottom of the roasting pan is covered with drippings. Some chefs like to cook the roast in the oven on a bed of mirepoix. Another technique when using a rack is to saute the mirepoix in the drippings. If there's a lot of fat in the pan, you may want to remove some first. Once the mirepoix is sautéed, excess fat can be removed and the pan can be deglazed. The liquid used for deglazing a roasting pan is typically a stock, although it could be other ingredients like fruit juices or wine. You can then strain it, skim it, and season it to create a jus, or you could thicken it to create a gravy. Now I will demonstrate a recipe using a boneless leg of American